Stegosaurus once roamed the land here. I'm sorry.
Well, the history is one of it's a little bit of a checkered past, and you know, in our case, we tend to embrace that.
Essentially, the city has used RINO for all of their more undesirable uses.
It used to be the industrial area to support downtown Denver.
Most of it was just large warehouses. That's really it. I mean, once Broadway stopped at Lodo, and even before that, it was just a mass of warehouses and industrial businesses.
When I was a kid, I used to ride my bike around this. This all used to be no man's land. Like, there was no reason to ever come down here 15 years ago. But, you know, to see what it's turned into now is, from someone who especially is from here, is a really, really cool thing. Because to me, this is still Curtis Park. You know, I live right up the street. There's a park right up the street. I used to play here when I was a kid. So this was always known as Curtis Park to me.
It's generally mostly called 5 Points, but a few developers moved into the area and they started calling it River North.
It's colored, it's rich, it's steeped in a lot of culture.
Very strong jazz connection, which of course is rooted in music, which is this kind of like overlap between the, you know, performance, visual, you know, the creative spaces, and presenting that to the public. And in a lot of ways, you know, we're not trying to do anything new with this. We're just trying to figure out how to make it work with a new population of people.
The growth that's been going on here in the past couple of years, and in this past 9 months especially, has just been phenomenal.
Principal thing that differentiates this neighborhood than other neighborhoods is primarily just architecture and the industrial factor.
You know, RINO was one of the last neighborhoods that survives from that era where great buildings were built.
It's all these really rad old brick and metal abandoned buildings.
You have some of the craftsman style that showed up here. There's still a little bit of the Victorian that showed up here. Then you've got the industrial warehouse, and then you've got the sort of strange older office building that's now been converted into housing. People have decided that that's where they're going to live. Again, it's just this wonderful little mix of everything you could possibly want.
You've got a bunch of old buildings that were very underutilized that have been brought back to have some life in them and be utilized. And then it's juxtaposed with modern buildings. Taxi is a good example, as something that almost shouldn't have worked, but it's been incredibly successful.
Taxi was a kind of a good catalyst here in terms of taking the buildings and not gentrifying, but basically, if you look at the architecture, it captures that industrial grittiness. And the idea of Taxi was to create a new workplace in the city. It was an alternative to the downtown cubicles. It was an alternative to the suburban office space, and a place where people could collaborate, meet, and begin to develop a kind of campus environment. I thought the proximity to the river and an attraction I had to industrial areas was really one of the major reasons that I looked at developing Taxi.
And also just ability to build some new modern forms that are possible here based on the lack of population and lack of resistance to new ideas that wouldn't necessarily be possible in more established areas of the city.
But yeah, Taxi's, who takes an old parking lot next to a river and turns it into a cool development? That's silly.
The idea for Taxi has really been more of a catalyst and part of a broader ecosystem.
We view the environmental thing much bigger, taking a area that really was totally somewhat abandoned, was mistreated, kind of bringing it back to life.
There's a level of kind of derelict type infrastructure that there's plenty of room for improvement, and what that's going to do is really be a catalyst for kind of more positive type of uses, but specifically an emphasis on bikes and pedestrians, and really finding ways to de-emphasize vehicular use.
The important thing is urbanization is really a very environmentally friendly kind of thing. It puts people together. There's less reliance on cars. There's more walking, biking, personal communication. All of those kind of things are really what Taxi's about, RINO is about, and this whole community concept.
I think a lot has to do with the architecture up here, I think.
The property values historically have been significantly less than most other neighborhoods that have a mixed industrial residential use. That's allowed people to come in and be more creative and take greater risks than they would in other neighborhoods.
So it does feel like Brooklyn, it does feel like London. These are places I've lived that I've seen industrial areas where there used to be nothing turn into art centers because artists want space, you know? They want to be able to have a big warehouse or somewhere they can paint a big mural.
I think because the interaction between residents and small business owners.
The people who have been here and live here, and blocks and blocks and blocks of neighbors that have been here for generations. Everyone who's been here understands the value that that neighborhood provides. It's being true to the roots of that neighborhood and maintaining an establishment with that neighborhood.
Most of the people here try to think of ways that we can keep our businesses sustainable but profitable. And again, I think that's part of the fact that we don't have the big box and the big chain stores, is we're allowed to make our own rules because we all own this. We're all invested in this. We're all a part of this neighborhood, and it's in our best interest to see that it can continue.
You know, I think it's definitely on the right track. People are starting to know about it more, and that can come with some bad. I think that right now some of us sort of feel, pretty excited to be part of it.
And it's a living experiment, so the goal isn't to necessarily control it. I think hopefully that we've provided some of the home base for some of the culture and a certain critical mass for others to be able to build on.
I think success breeds success, and I think what you're seeing in RINO is that grittiness, a little bit of nice graffiti, Larimer Street kind of evolving. The hope is that since it's working, it's going to continue.
I like the small feel of this area. I like the self-contained feel of this area. I hope it continues to develop and it gets a little bit more businesses in here, but I hope that they're all local and a good number of them are creative.
I'd hate to see the soul taken out of it that's sort of been established with the funky arts community.
I would love to see RINO not be one of those typical places where, artists move in, they make it cool, then rents go up, and then they can't afford it anymore, and then they get kicked out.
We want to maintain that sort of artistic edge, but at the same time, you do want a certain amount of development. And then, fingers crossed that it'll stop when it's supposed to.
It'll continue to change. More and more people will come in and breathe life into these old buildings and hopefully bring a lot more of the inspiring businesses and keep pushing harder,
So I think in the next 10 years, you're going to watch a lot of the neighborhood go from this kind of, I described it, island of misfit toys into maybe a pretty legitimate type of area.